you love recruiting, and I love recruiting. That's why we're doing this show, and that's why you guys are watching. But despite all the great information that's out there with 24/7 sports, rivals, and the newcomer On3, there's still a lot of mystery behind what goes into the rankings. How do they find players in this vast sea of, all this talent across the nation? Even though it's come a long, long way from when I first was logging on to Rivals as a freshman in college. It's come a heck of a long way, and they're really doing a lot of great stuff. But tonight, we have a special guest. Allen Trieu of 24/7 is with us. He is a Midwest analyst for 24/7 recruiting, and he is going to hopefully peel back the curtain a little bit for us and talk about the process and the kind of this game behind the game we all love, that is college football recruiting. This is The Official. Good evening, everyone. We got our guys here, Matt, big wide receiver guy, and David, Solving Football on Twitter. And of course, the man of the hour, Allen Trieu. Welcome to The Official.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're all very excited to have you. Someone who knows some of that inner workings, the secret sauce that goes into these rankings that we pour over every single year. But before we get started, just want to remind everyone, if you are watching this, I know you love college football, I know you love recruiting, and we've got a lot of good stuff over on the mother website, campustocanton.com. For the next 48 hours or so, you can still join at the lowest tier for $29.99 a year and get grandfathered in to the second tier, which is $49.99 a year for life. So pay for tier 1, get tier 2 goodies. Additionally, check out our freshman guide, which we use a lot of 24/7's information to put that thing together. The freshman guide for all your C2C needs, we have over 180 players ranked in that thing, and it's really, really great. We're proud of it. $20, or if you join until the next 48 hours, you get it for free with your subscription. Can't beat that. But anyway, back to business here. Allen, you cover Midwest recruiting pretty much for 24/7. Is that right?
That is correct. Yep.
So I think just starting off, for me and for the rest of our viewers, give us a little background. How long have you been at 24/7 now? And then as an analyst, and kind of what got you to this point to do the dream job?
Yeah. So 24/7, I've been in recruiting for a long time. I think this will be year 15. I'm not that old. I started when I was a freshman in college, so that's I haven't been doing it my whole adult life. But that was with Scout, a company called Scout. Rest in peace. We merged with 24/7. Probably it's been maybe 5 years or so that I've been under 24/7. So it's been kind of, and a lot of my coworkers are on 24/7 that were at Scout. So pretty much been with this company for a long time, some form of it. But 24/7 itself, only a couple of years. I got started by doing the draft. I started a draft website in the 8th grade, actually. And back then, there wasn't a whole lot of, the internet wasn't as big, weren't as many draft websites. So it got seen. And that's kind of how I got started, transitioned over to recruiting a little bit later, and discovered that I liked that more. And so I stayed in that.
Interestingly, I think Matt, I think David too. I think both of you have a similar story in the sense of you started really focusing on the draft and now you've transitioned to recruiting and you like it better.
Yeah, I've been draft nut for like past 7 years or so. And then just this past year or so, I've got into recruiting, and then that's been it for me, Haven't gone back.
Yeah, I think I've been more of a casual since high school pretty much. And then I've only been doing the NFL draft for like a year, and I've gravitated more towards recruiting again and just doing like a huge deep dive now. So I'm enjoying it quite a bit.
But Alan, why did you like it better? I mean, obviously you had a love for the draft at an early age, but what about recruiting and the high school mining those prospects do you like better?
So I think part of that was they were my age at that time, and I was playing high school football, and I had friends who were trying to get recruited. I was actually back then the one that was putting a VCR into a VCR and trying to make their tape for them. So and there were some guys in my area who were getting recruited, and then as I started covering it, I think that I got credentialed, went to the combine as a teenager, and those guys they've all made it, and I think the cool part about recruiting was you were meeting kids who hadn't made it yet. You really felt like you were actually discovering somebody, whereas with the draft at that point everybody was, I wasn't going to the combine and nobody knew Eli Manning or Ben Roethlisberger, and then that draft recruiting felt like a more grassroots discovery phase kind of thing.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that as someone who, when I was playing in high school, in like 2013, ESPN was the big recruiting site back then, and I just remember their layout and everything. It was very enticing, but not quite the same anymore.
Now they stink. Just kidding. They're no 24/7 though.
So by my name, you could probably tell I really like wide receivers. I was wondering if you have any specialization of a position, or if you have a position that you feel like you project the best to the next level.
Yeah, so I played quarterback, so I have some base at that position, but I also think that position is really hard to, especially with high school film and highlight film. A lot of the time, you're so early in their development that I can't say that quarterback is one of my more fun positions to go over. It's hard in high school, and you really don't want to get those wrong. So that's tough. I think I've gotten pretty good at offensive line, and maybe it's because I'm up here in the Midwest and in the North, and I've over the years seen, what Iowa and Wisconsin do with taking tight ends, or even, saw Eric Fisher as a high school, 220-pound high school guy. And so I've kind of figured it out a little bit over the years. So I think I've gotten a lot better at that position. That's the position I almost enjoy now, because they're so different from when you first see them to what they end up at in college, that position might be one that I don't know if I'd say specialize in, but that's definitely one that I think I've gotten better at evaluating, and I enjoy evaluating.
I like that answer because I used to play offensive tackle. So
yeah, I mean the transition from 260-pound, that's a big tackle at a lot of high schools, even to what they look like at 320. Preparing for the draft, it's probably one of the biggest transitions, I bet, of any position that you see.
You see these guys keep coming out of Northern Iowa and places like that, and it's always fun to kind of go back and look at them and go, what did we miss something there? Some of them are 230, 240. I remember seeing David Edwards as a high school quarterback, and then he's playing offensive line at Wisconsin and in the NFL. Those transitions are really fun. They're frustrating sometimes because they're hard to see coming, but I think that's what makes that evaluation interesting, and what makes that position fun.
Yeah, what is it with the Big Ten and that Midwest? I feel like y'all do have these transitions like crazy. I mean, what JJ Watt went from like 240-pound tight end to to the best defensive. I guess he was kind of a tackle end combo. Just anywhere along the line, just wrecking stuff. So
Lane Johnson, great example of that too.
Yep, another one out of the Midwest again.
So I have a question. What goes into the 24/7 grades? Is it mostly film analysis, live viewings? Do you guys use any analytics? So how do you kind of culminate those grades?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I think there's a lot of misconception about out there. So I think the myth part of that is that it's a lot based on offers and where the kid is going, and then camps. I would say that it's not nearly as much those things as everybody thinks. A lot of it is film. So it is interesting, as we're currently in the NFL draft process right now, and you have pro days going on, you have combines going on. I'd say we try to mirror our process to that as much as possible. These pro days are happening and we're talking about them, but a lot of the work is done, right? The film work is done. The Senior Bowl stuff is done. this pro day stuff is very supplemental, and that's how I think camps are to us versus the high school film. Now, I think we are more reliant on camps than the NFL is on pro days because the film is different. You have 3-4 years of film at the college level. You know what level of competition that is. You have a baseline to know that when a guy is playing Missouri, what that means versus when a guy is playing Alabama, you know what that means with us. We're watching, who knows? There's time, we try to figure out who they're playing against, but it's really hard to compare. We're not getting as much, I mean, with several thousand guys to evaluate, we're not getting to watch as much full game film as they do in the NFL process. So that's why we maybe have to rely on camps a little bit more for even just seeing what somebody is built like, getting verified measurables. Things are very important. So I would say film still is the bulk of it. Camps are another part of it. Analytics do go into a little bit. You kind of are touching a nerve there because our staff, we have some guys on our staff who are big analytics guys and some guys who could care less. I'm probably like squarely in the middle. So we fight about that all the time. So there are analytics that go into it. And the interesting thing about us is we're largely regionally based. And then we have people at the national level who oversee and then tell me, like, as a regional guy, hey, we think you're great here is wrong. We think you're right on here. And so depending on who's doing the grading within the region, their analytics could play more of a part into it than in other regions. I think our guys at the top like to combine all of that and figure it out. And we do have two people, people also think that we're just a bunch of writers and reporters who don't know anything about football. That's the two guys that are two of the guys that are running our scouting department both worked in college offices. One of them worked at the NFL level, played at Michigan. So we have people who have been around the game for a long time at the very top of the rankings.
I think that's interesting that you have the reputation of correlating to offers to your grades, which isn't something I've actually run the numbers on. I've checked about 500 or so recruits since 2016 for wide receivers. And I think Joshua Moore is one of the highest in offers. He had like over 50. And you guys weren't that high. You had like wide receiver 20 or something along those lines. So I think that's kind of silly.
I mean, the colleges are all watching the same film we are, right? So a lot of the time, if a bunch of colleges see the film and think that guy's worth a scholarship, we're also going to generally think. So that's why it seems like it correlates for the most part, is because the big time recruits are the big time recruits for a reason. Now, when you see something like that, where you see an offer list, that's what I would say to, you guys who really follow this stuff, or people who are looking for who am I going to draft in a year. If you see an offer list that doesn't match the ranking, good or bad, if you see a guy with a bunch of offers, big offers, and the ranking is lower than you expect, well, we've probably seen something there to say something doesn't match for us either. Or if you see a guy who doesn't have, why is this guy in the top 150 nationally and he's barely got any offers? We've probably come across something that makes us feel good that player is going to outplay their offer list. So when you see outliers like that, there's usually a good sign that we've come across some information or seen something to make us kind of go against the offer grain on that one.
Perfect. And you hit it on Joshua Moore there. So great example of that.
Yeah, this is all very fascinating, just to hear how all these things come into the ranking and how you guys do the number grade. In addition to stars, which I really like the 4-digit. When we're trying to do some analytics work on our end, kind of inventing some stuff, playing around with things, seeing if anything sticks. That number grade is much more granular than 4 or 5 stars, because then you have kind of rank tiers inside of 4 and 5 stars. So that's really great for us, helpful for us. What is the goal of the 24/7 rankings? Is it this guy's going to be good in college, or is it this guy's going to be good all the way to the NFL high draft pick, or is it some combination of just being good at football? Because I've wondered about that myself. We with the C2C format, we are actually worried about, as managers, points produced on the college side, but also ultimately we want that holy grail of the guy who gets all the way, to an early round draft pick. So when we're looking at your grades, what are you thinking in that projection?
Sure. Okay. So actually, first going back to what you're talking about, the 4-digit, that is the composite, which I think I should clarify because some people that are listening may be confused about what that is. So we assign a grade at 24/7, which is under that. And that's a rating, a 2-digit number. And then there's an algorithm that takes the grade of that player on all the other recruiting sites, not On3 yet, but that's coming. And it produces a composite. It's not, I always want to say an average. It's not actually an average. There's a formula that kind of weighs it.
Oh, they are usually separately weighed. I didn't know that.
I think ours is weighed heavier. 24/7's is weighed a little bit heavier, and then the rest are equal from there.
Oh, okay. I wanted to know if you like.
I always
you were
assumed it
throwing
was just
shade.
the average, so that's good.
I wanted to know. I want to know who the juicy tidbits were, like throwing shade on. Well, this service only gets 10%.
Trust me, there were times where I wish we could do that, but there's not. So so that's the composite. Some people have a hard time, people don't know what the difference is. So the goal of our specific 24/7 rating is at the end of the day, draft position. Where is that player going to get drafted? So if a player is a 5-star that goes in the first round and then busts in the NFL, we consider that as we got it right. If we rate a player a 5-star and that player goes in the 6th round and then becomes a superstar, we actually consider that as, well, we've got that one wrong because he got drafted in the 6th round. And so some people have questioned that system to say, why are you guys basing a high school ranking on a player that's going to play college, but then you base it off the NFL draft? Well, we consider the NFL draft as a metric of how that player was in college. Obviously, all of that research is based on how that player did in college, but there's also a component of that of upside, right? If you're a great college player, but you don't have NFL upside, you're not going very high in the draft. So that's kind of where ours is. It's not just college production, because it's hard to, if you grade somebody on just how good of a college player they're going to be, sometimes there's a system guy who will do super well in college that we don't see coming. So we think that the NFL draft more encapsulates what we're looking for.
I think that's totally fair. And then, the good college players happen in G5. I mean, you can have a dominant, player at Utah State, but like you said, I mean, if y'all miss on that, he doesn't go drafted, whatever. Part of its system, part of its competition. So I think it's a fair thing to say ultimately. And then transitioning to the NFL is also hard. There's a lot of mental stuff there you can't necessarily know about. So I think that point of getting drafted is a pretty nice number. And for us, I mean, that's kind of what I do when I'm looking at a prospect myself. I can't really know NFL stardom, but what I can do is say, does he have, like, I think I do similar to what y'all are saying, like, requisite size, requisite athletic ability, and then some nuance or maybe something else that gives him an edge. I can see it for 3 years from now. But yeah, I think that's totally fair, actually. I have no qualms with that.
Yeah, I don't know that we always do the best job of explaining it. And that's why I think once people hear it, they're like, oh, yeah, that's fair. But it's not really like easy to find that philosophy, maybe, unless you really go looking for it. It is on the website somewhere, but it's not.
Is there like an about page where it's on? I haven't seen that, honestly.
Yeah, it is. There is an explanation on the rankings and ratings and all that stuff. But I think people sometimes it's easier to just complain before you read the explanation.
Welcome to Twitter.
Always the easiest option.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask about your how you guys go about player discovery, because I feel like especially you guys are projecting like 4 years out at a time, and just I imagine it's a lot of camp work initially, and just maybe guys to pop on stats or guys you saw live attending games. But I'd love to hear about your overall process in terms of finding a new guy and then determining, oh, this is a guy, we're really gonna pump him up.
Yeah. So the process is however we can get it. All of the things you mentioned are part of it. It's even been a handful of times where we're out at a workout or a college camp, and there's a 7th or 8th grader running around out there that just happens to be. I remember Rashawn Gary showing up. I think he was an 8th grader or a 9th grader at Ohio State's camp, and everybody kind of turned their head, and when there's no way that kid is 13 or whatever he was at the time. So, that if we happen to go to a game, like you said, we get the rosters, and first thing I do is scan to see, are there any freshmen on this varsity then that player actually playing. So we discover them then. There's times where we don't discover them first. There's sometimes where a kid who's a freshman will tweet an offer and we'll go, oh, I didn't know who that guy was. And then we start to track them. There's other times where somebody tells us, a high school coach or one of their teammates, say, hey, we got a guy coming up. This is their next. I'm always, whenever I talk to a high school coach, if I call a high school coach to interview them about one of their juniors or seniors, one of my last questions is always, is there anybody coming up in your program that we need to know about? And we start putting those players in the database. It's become more important than ever. Under Armour actually now in their camp series does middle school camps. And we've found a number of I think the one in Chicago they did, if I go back 4 or 5 years, there were like 40 future Power 5 guys at that camp as 7th and 8th graders. So as much as I've not wanted to go, like I used to be, hey, I don't look at anybody until they've played varsity. That's not really realistic anymore. Some schools are offering guys before they even get to high school. So we have to start early. I'd like to think the bulk of it is still you get to varsity or you do something at a camp against good competition that puts you on the radar. But sometimes too, we get a million emails and DMs a day of like, hey, look at this kid, look at this kid, look at this kid.
Oh, yeah, I can't imagine.
Sometimes you just click on the right huddle link on the right day too.
That's really fascinating. I mean, you got to probably have someone. You could have someone a full-time job just like managing the DMs. I mean, everyone's probably trying to get your eyeballs on their kid or their player.
My message requests are a real mess.
Thanks for answering mine.
Yeah.
So how do you guys collect size data, like height and weight? Do you guys get that mainly from the camps? Or how do you guys get that?
Yes. Camps. I mean, kids send us their physical cards. And then, there's a certain level of just, honestly, some of it is having to trust the high schools, but the camps are the one where we can really feel like we can trust that for the most part. Actually, there have been kids over the years who have gone to one camp and measured 6'2", and then gone to another camp the next week and measured 6'4". And we don't really understand sometimes how that can happen, but it happens.
I wonder if there's like deals, like, slipping some guy 100 to give his kid an extra 2 inches. I mean, it happened. I'm sure stuff like that's happening in college for different reasons, maybe not measurements, but who knows?
Sometimes I suspect that it's just pure record keeping, that the wrong kid got switched with some other kid. We've detected that where I'm like, I know this kid. I've stood next to this kid. This size is off, So a lot of it then is just eyeballing it and getting close. We just want to be close. We know we're not going to get official NFL combine heights and weights on every kid that we evaluate. It's just impossible. So getting to see them and at least being able to size them up and see them next to each other. We've pulled up, visit pictures where all these kids are standing, taking a group picture, and we're going, okay, they're about the same height. And we've done some of that sleuthing work. So again, it's kind of like what we just talked about. You just take the data and the information however you can get it, because there's so many kids that we have to evaluate and very few official channels to be able to get a lot of this data.
So I'm gonna actually just do a little bit off the track here and save some of these questions. We'll go into the Discord after this for members of our site. But so you're talking about there's no formal channel to get some of this stuff. Do you see the industry changing in that way a little bit, where maybe we do get some more formal? I mean, obviously the camps might be as close as you get, but it sounds like there still could be some streamlining. There still could be some better funneling to get these kids in front of the right eyeballs. Do you see that happening? Do you have any inkling of what that could look like in the future?
I mean, there's some of it. There used to be those opening regionals and everything we at least knew that from city to city, it was the same people, same tape measure, same whatever, They're doing that at Under Armour now. We're not really privy to that information. So we would just have to hope that it tells us. or the kids get measured at a school. They obviously don't tell us, but sometimes we can get a kid to volunteer. Hey, Iowa State measured me at 6'3", and then we just have to trust that that's accurate. I would like to think that maybe that will happen. Like I said, it's already set up. Or like if you're like Rivals runs their own camps and they height and weight the kids all there, so they have measurements on those guys. The issue that is that I think that a lot of the kids and the people around them sometimes don't want that. They don't want official times out. Maybe they don't want to officially get measured. I've heard of kids refusing to get measured on their college visits. So you get some of that. And I don't know if some of these guys think maybe it'll hurt their recruitment if there's numbers like that out there. So, I mean, we are always striving for more accuracy with everything that we do. So I would love it if there was. I don't like having to go to a game and guess how tall a kid is. But at the end of the day, too, when we talked before, Matt, like about what we like about recruiting versus the draft, that's almost kind of like a weird piece of it, is that you're kind of like one part PI in that way. And there is some guesswork, but I guess in a way that's kind of what makes it interesting.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that, because there's just such a lack of information with recruiting. There's just so many more holes to fill. And yeah, I can definitely relate to the sleuthing. Like David and I will go on recruits' Twitter profiles and hunt down their birthday to figure out, oh, is this an old recruit, young recruit? Like,
oh yeah, he's definitely
pretty deep in that wormhole.
I know Matt's been searching handles plus happy birthday to see what day people were tweeting at a player happy birthday to get his birthday.
Guilty as charged.
And Matt, we part of some of the stuff we've done is we were curious, how can we judge competition talent or whatever. So one idea we had, let's plug in enrollment size for all these schools and see if that can, does that matter in terms of future production or whatever, like where these guys come from, school size. So Matt was over there spending hours on schooldigger.com, which was just giving enrollment size. I mean, I was just like, dude, you are going above and beyond over here.
I've tried to do that for the first round of the NFL draft. I tried to do it for the whole NFL draft, and I gave up at some point, but I tried to see if high school size matters in draft position. I don't remember if I got real far though.
I don't have numbers for draft position. For college production, it matters then just like a standard max preps strength of schedule. Matters significantly more. I don't know why, but
not terribly surprising. I imagine that some of that too is that we see some kids who are really talented that start off at maybe a smaller school. They always seem to kind of matriculate their way to one of the bigger schools in the area, so that could skew it as well.
That is true. I've noticed that as I've gotten more and more into this, that guys do jump around a whole lot. I mean, it's not common where a guy has like 4 years at a good school or at one school. I mean, they're jumping around all over the place, and I never know. Is it probably it's a combination of things, but I never knew if it was like, is it a grades thing or is it, competition or trying to get more eyeballs on you, going to a bigger school, better school, national games, or are they going to be on ESPN if they go to this other school? I mean, I don't know what the reasons are. Probably multifaceted.
Oh yeah, it's all of those things. Sometimes they don't get along with their coach, or sometimes the process of getting recruiting, it's pretty stressful. Honestly, these kids I always say everybody wants to be highly recruited until you get highly recruited. And then you're like, oh man. And it's a lot of stress on the kid and the parents and the coaches. And sometimes I find that sometimes the relationship with the high school coach can go south based on recruiting. Wow. That has definitely happened. Also, I've seen more in the last maybe 5 years, kids having to leave their high school for their senior year because the previous high school doesn't allow them to graduate and enroll early. So that's something that has happened more and more. If you go to a high school that can't accommodate that, or I think it's even some places just have a strict policy against that, I've seen kids leave for that reason. So it's all of the things that you just mentioned.
Sure. It seems to happen a lot. I mean, a lot, especially the higher ranked guys. I mean, you rarely go to max preps and see 4 years, same school, their whole career. So, well, we have some more questions for you. I think you've said you do have a little more time with us. We are going to switch platforms. And members of campus2canton.com get to see some behind the scenes, some extra questions with Allen. But for this episode, Allen, thanks for being here. This was super enlightening. For Matt and David, this is Alfred, and this has been The Official.